When they think of Mahatma Gandhi, we usually get this picture of a peaceful, kind of saintly guy. But what if we looked at him in a totally different way? As a brilliant political strategist, a revolutionary who actually created one of the most powerful blueprints for changing the world ever. In this explainer, we're going to tear down that blueprint and see how it works.
And this one, quote, wow, it just gets right to the heart of his radical idea, not with weapons or armies, but with something he called soul force. So how in the world do you gently shake a global empire right down to its foundations? Well, the answer is all in his very unique philosophy.
Okay, first we have to get our heads around the sheer scale of the challenge he was facing, because Gandhi wasn't just fighting one enemy. He was fighting two, and one of them was way, way bigger than the British Empire.
And this distinction right here is absolutely crucial. Sure, the British Empire was the obvious political enemy, but for Gandhi, the real, deeper enemy was what he called modern civilization itself. Its obsession with machines, its greed, its soulless materialism. In his 1909 book, Hind Swaraj, he went so far as to call it satanic. He was convinced that just kicking the British out but keeping their broken system would be a totally hollow victory.
So if you're going to fight a moral battle, you need a moral weapon, right? Gandhi's entire philosophy was basically a toolkit designed for exactly this, a kind of spiritual arsenal. Let's break down the core components.
The master weapon in this arsenal is Satyagraha. Now, it often gets translated as passive resistance, but Gandhi actually hated that term. He thought that sounded weak. Satyagraha, or truth force, is the total opposite. It's an active, powerful force that's meant to convert your opponent, not crush them, by appealing to their own conscience.
And the fuel that powers Satyagraha is Ahimsa. Now, this isn't just don't hurt people. Gandhi called it positive nonviolence, an active, courageous love for your enemy. The idea is to hate the evil thing they're doing, but love the person doing it. It's a philosophy that requires incredible strength.
And get this quote right here just shows you how much strength he thought it took. This is one of Gandhi's most shocking statements. He believed that nonviolence required immense courage, and that being a coward and running from a fight was a much bigger sin than actually fighting. For him, Ahimsa was for the brave, not a hiding place for the fearful.
So the ultimate goal of all this was Swaraj, or self-rule. And this had a brilliant double meaning. Yes, of course, it meant political freedom from Britain. But, and this is the important part, it also meant individual freedom. The power for every single person to rule over their own impulses, their own greed, their own anger. Because for Gandhi, how could a nation of people who couldn't even rule themselves be ready for political self-rule? Okay, so he's got this incredible philosophical toolkit, but how did he actually use it in the real world to take on an empire? Let's see how these ideas built one of the largest mass movements in all of human history. And what you see over 2 decades is this really clear escalation in his strategy. He started off in 1920 by just asking Indians to stop cooperating with the British system. Simple enough. A decade later, he upped the ante to actively, but non-violently, breaking their laws. And then by 1942, it was just an all-out, non-negotiable demand for them to leave.
Now, right in the heart of that middle phase, civil disobedience, is this one number, 240. That's how many miles Gandhi and his followers walked to the sea back in 1930. But why? I mean, what's the big deal about a really long walk? Well, the target was the British monopoly on salt. And you might be thinking, salt? But it was absolutely genius. Think about it. Every single person in India, whether they were rich or poor, needed salt. The British tax on it was the perfect symbol of an unfair, invisible law that hurt everyone. So by marching to the sea and making his own salt, Gandhi made that injustice visible to the entire world with one simple, powerful act. And that brings us to the final, high-stakes phase in 1942. The world is at war, and Gandhi launches the Quit India movement with his new, incredibly urgent slogan, "Do or die." Now let's be clear, this was not a call to violence. It was him saying, that's it, there's no turning back. The fight for freedom is now an absolute, a fight to the finish.
But, getting the British to leave, that was really only half the job. Gandhi spent just as much time and energy thinking about what kind of society should actually replace the empire, and he had a very clear blueprint for that too.
His vision was called Sarvodaya, which means the upliftment of all. And it's totally different from the Western idea of, the greatest good for the greatest number. For Gandhi, a society was only successful if its most vulnerable person was successful. Everybody had to rise up together. And his economic ideas, whoa, they were just as radical. He saw industrial mass production as this dehumanizing thing that just created unemployment and put wealth in the hands of a few.
So his solution was production by the masses, empowering every single person, every village, to be self-sufficient. This was all famously symbolized by the spinning wheel, the charkha.
So you might be wondering, what about the rich people in this system? Well, he offered this third way, somewhere between capitalism and communism, that he called trusteeship. He basically argued that the wealthy could keep their wealth, but they had to act as trustees, holding it on behalf of everyone in society. It was a revolutionary idea to try and solve inequality without a violent class war, relying instead on a moral transformation.
Of course, Gandhi's ideas didn't just disappear when he died. They took on a life of their own, for sure, but they also ignited some of the most intense and important debates that are still shaping our world today.
I mean, his whole philosophy of nonviolent resistance basically became the playbook for the biggest social movements of the 20th century. Take Martin Luther King Jr., for example. He brilliantly adapted Satyagraha for the American civil rights movement. King called Gandhi's philosophy the only morally and practically sound method open to oppressed people. That just proves that this soul force could be a real strategic political weapon anywhere in the world.
But his legacy is also really complex, and one of the most important debates was with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar over the caste system. Gandhi was a reformist. He wanted to change the hearts of upper caste Hindus, and he called the lowest caste Harijan, which means children of God. Ambedkar, on the other hand, saw this as not nearly enough. He demanded a radical destruction of the entire caste system, focusing on legal and political rights for the community he called Dalit, or the broken people. This fundamental disagreement is still a central tension in India today.
And all of this really leaves us with one massive question for today. Gandhi imagined a world where people were so morally in control of themselves that the need for a powerful, controlling state would just wither away. So in our world today, is that vision of self-control a practical guide for our future, or is it just a beautiful but ultimately impossible ideal? It's definitely something to think about.